Today on the Quarter Hour Podcast, one of the greatest of all time. He conquered AM, FM, even conquered the ABC. Well, what was his secret? Let's find out. Hi and welcome to the Quarter Hour Podcast. I'm your host Liam Renton, and today we're chatting to Richard Stubbs, a giant in the radio world. From his days on the 3XY Zoo to Triple M Breakfast with Eddie Maguire, Bridget Duclos and Tim Smith to many years, smashing it on the ABC on afternoons in Melbourne, always a ratings winner, and then he left. So what did he learn from his tour of radio duty? Let's find out. Richard Stubbs, welcome to the Quarter Hour Podcast.
Liam, thanks so much, mate. Pleasure to be here. I'm all excited. Thanks for thinking of me.
How did Australia's best stand-up comic get into radio? Like, because you were doing gigs. How did you get on the radio?
A very clever manager, basically, which is not a sentence you say often in radio. Gary Soprane was PD, program director of 3XY, which was an AM rock station that had been mighty, but FM was coming in, and he knew he couldn't compete, and so he looked around and he saw in New York Z100 had a thing called the Z Morning Zoo, and it was, for the time, quite different as a breakfast show. They kept the door open, they had lots of characters, staff, it was loose. And he thought, maybe I can do that, maybe I can create that kind of thing so there'll be interesting content that can hold us up against the FM band. And so he went around and he tried to find people to go on it. I was doing shows at Melbourne's Last Laugh, and he went and saw that and then approached me to be a part of a zoo concept, as they call it. And we formed 3XY's XY Zoo. And I'm happy to say I beat Shirley Strawn out for the gig. He interviewed for it as well. And, and that's how it started. And it didn't leap out of the blocks. Weirdly, I think I was the first stand-up comic ever to go on a breakfast radio show. And now it's like the common blueprint, and I apologise for that, but that, I think I was the first one.
Well, that was actually my next question, because I was going to say you were the first, like you were the trailblazer. There was no other comedian known on radio before you set the mould.
I know, it seems hard to believe, right? But we are talking a long time ago. So this was late 84, and I'd been doing stand-up for about a year, and away it went.
So was radio the dream? Was it on the cards, or you just kind of fell into it?
I sort of say, no, I hadn't thought about it. But then looking back, when I was at university, I randomly just decided to go on the university radio and do shifts on that. I just wanted to do it out of nowhere. And then when I left uni, I worked on community radio when I didn't have a job for a while. I worked on community radio and did mid-dawns. Again, I just liked it. So I got to say, I think I've always kind of liked radio. Yeah, It lured me. I always drifted to try to do it. So, yeah, there you go.
So for those that don't know the story or weren't in Melbourne, how do you go from 3XY over to Triple M? How does that conversation happen? How did they lure you over? Was there a gap in between?
So, no gap. XY was going down in flames, different owners, and it was really a case of jumping off a burning plane onto something else. Triple M was Eon FM and was going through a brand change to become Triple M. And so it was a kind of fresh start. And it was at that point I joined across. But I joined across to do mornings. And that was pretty radical because that meant I was on my own, not in a team. And I suddenly had to learn to push the buttons. Like, looking back, my training was not adequate. And I literally took the station off air so long that the logger tape kicked in, that the tape that kicks in case the station's nuked, that kicked in because I was stumbling around trying to teach myself how to panel and what to do, and oh my God, why is it over there and I'm over here, and I still had those nightmares that the song's running out and I'm miles from queuing up the next one. But eventually I skilled up and became, that was successful. Like I got to number one in mornings doing that. And the D-Gen were the breakfast team at that point. So it was kind of the D-Gen for breakfast and then me. And the D-Gen left eventually to do
The late
TV,
show.
and I took over breakfast. Yeah.
Can we talk about the heady days of Triple M Melbourne? So some of the things that I remember seeing along the way, you had your face on a tram, you had your own Triple M branded chopper, you had a semi-trailer called the Rock Rig that would turn up and do impromptu concerts and OBs. What was it like?
Cool. It was ace. Yeah, the trams were everywhere. They're an old W-class tram. At one point, crossing the road, trying to get to the studio, I nearly got squashed between two of them, and I remember thinking, as I thought I was going to die, going, this is going to be a standing joke forever now. And at that point, I think Triple M had a great vision for who it was and what it was and where it stood in the marketplace. And that really helped. And all those kind of things lent into that. So
you famously networked nationally. Tell me about those conversations. Were you keen? Because I was a listener in Brisbane, so I remember getting you. I knew you from your gig on Tonight Live when you're hosting. So as a teenager, I loved it. I'm like, how good is it having Stubbsy on the radio and the TV? What was it like for you?
Yeah, so I was dragged like a reluctant dog at the vets. I've got lots of thoughts about how you would do it. I think national programming works best if you admit that you're national and run it that way. This was, we were going to be as if we were going to be the local breakfast show. And management changed, I reckon, 4 times in that period. And each one had differing views. The last 2 particularly just, we don't want a national breakfast show. And so they withdrew support for it. I think too that there's no way to shortcut that 1.5 to 2 years in the market before your breakfast show starts really taking off. I think you've just got to hang in and build, and you're best not to, as we see with Kyle and Jackie O in Melbourne, you're best not to trumpet it too much at the start, because that's the worst you're going to be, and you've got to build. You've just got to do the hard work to build, and we were doing that, but not supported. Management hated it, and then gradually took us out of marketplaces. So, yeah, frustrating, because you felt like, man, I think we can do this. But,
You've done a few mediums in terms of TV and radio. Which do you prefer?
So they're all different. If people know you from TV, they'll stand next to you and point to their friend going, there's that guy from the TV. Whereas if they know you from radio, they'll come up and continue a conversation with a friend. Because radio, you're with people when they're on their own, when they're at work, at home, in the car, whatever they're doing, they're just kind of on their own, and you're their companion. And if you do radio correctly, you form a connection. And I think that's the critical aspect. What do I enjoy? I think radio and stand-up, I think because with both those mediums, there's really not much between you and the audience. You do a thing, the audience hears it. Television, you're going to do a thing, but it has to be lit, and the camera has to be there, and the people have to be, it's got to be rehearsed and stuff. It's a whole different medium. Radio, it's immediacy and its connection. I think radio I like so much because of that really, really personal nature that you form. That connection you form with your listeners is great.
You spent over a decade at the ABC. Fundamental differences between FM rock radio and your time at the ABC?
Oh, huge. So many. We could fill the 15 minutes. I mean, in brief, on commercial radio, you're paid to lie. In the ABC, you're paid to strictly tell the truth. Commercial radio, you can say, I went to that restaurant who's a sponsor of ours and they were fantastic. Wow, how great are they? And the sales team get a grab of it and everyone high-fives you, even if you didn't go. On the ABC, that would be disciplinary action. They're scrupulous about, you tell the absolute truth about what you're doing. But there's a real difference in work attitude and what people are trying to do. That was a big gear change. There's a lot of people in the public service who just go to work and come home and don't want to get better. And that was confusing. But in both, you'll find people who are really passionate about the programs they're making and trying to make the products better. And those people tend to find each other and make informal connections so you have a sort of team within a team that get things done. And they don't have the radio on in the office. So your station isn't on the office. That's all the jingoistic. It's annoying to have that noise in the background.
There's something nice about hearing yourself when you go into the loo. You're at the toilet. Oh, I'm still on the radio. I know that song is still playing.
Particularly that. And why is it that when people design radio studios, they put the toilets as far from the actual on-air studio as they possibly can? Like, that's the one governing rule of all radio station design. First things first, where's the studio? Okay, diagonally, what's the furthest point? Great, that's where we'll put the toilet. Yeah. Possibly behind 4 or 5 doors to just slow the process down.
It was a sad day for radio when you left. You were rating number 1. Any simple answer as to why you left?
I think it's in that. I think with radio that you either quit or get sacked, barring you step in front of a tram. They're the ways you leave your job. And there's only one of those you can control. So I'm very much of a one of I want to go on my timing. At the ABC, I'd done 11 years of afternoons, got to number 1 with afternoons, which was great because I wanted the set. I've been lucky enough to get to number 1s in each shift I've done, so breakfast, mornings and afternoons on different radios, stations and commercial and ABC and stuff. And so, but once you've done it, I never want to phone it in. It's got to be a passion. It's got to be a thing. And when you start going, oh, it's that time of the year, we're going to do that segment about X, all that kind of stuff. And after a while, you haven't got 11 years of experience. You've got the same year 11 times is how it starts to feel. So it was time to bail for that reason. Also, I'd nursed my mum through dementia and then she'd passed. And that's shit. Anyone who's had to nurse anyone who's got a terrible disease understands. And so I needed to go off and just kind of cheer myself up. And the way to do that for me was to stop that before I started phoning it in and relight the spark by getting back to stand up in clubs and bars, which was, by the way, Liam, a terrible mistake because I hadn't done the club circuit for ages. Everyone I knew was dead or on the couch and no one knew anything about me and I had to start begging for 10-minute spots and start again. That was a lot harder than I thought.
Can we have a teaching moment? Teach us something about radio. What do you know about radio? What have you learnt?
What's our teaching moment? I think the saying you often hear, which is, it's better to apologise than ask permission. And I do, how can I put it? So you've got to make connection. Is critical with radio. You've got to imagine we're all sitting at a small table having a cup of tea. The listener's right there and they're listening and a part of the conversation. They're just sipping their tea so they can't talk right then. But you've got to involve listeners. If you look at the success of Christian O'Connell, one of the things he does so well is involve listeners to be a part of the conversation, to be a part of the program. That's key. I think creative ideas are best not shared. It's a real fine line because you want to be in a partnership with management and you want to be in a partnership with sales because all of you have to work together for success. But at the same time, creative ideas tend to be things that people haven't done before. So the people who haven't had those creative thoughts can't imagine them because if they could, they would have. So early days of your creativity, it's best to try it and then to work it through with people because otherwise people who don't have that creativity will be telling you, oh, no, I don't think that'll work. And I'll kind of squash the idea. And it's ideas that aren't usual that are going to stand you out from the pack, if that makes sense.
It does.
It's a really fine line. Like, you can't be a dick about it. I think when I was younger, I was often a dick about it, seeing an us and them relationship. But at the same time, you kind of got to, creativity doesn't work well in a committee. Creativity needs to be able to just be protected a little bit until it finds its feet, and then everyone can start fine-tuning it.
What's your best radio memory? What stands out?
I think immediacy. Twice, my producers at the ABC gave me a guest who didn't speak English. And think about that for a moment, mate. Just think about it. There you go. And I've got a guy on to talk about the horses he's brought in, and I've asked him a question, and he's gone, pardon? He does not speak a word of English. That was a great memory because I put out the call for anyone who spoke French, put a listener on, and then got the listener to be the interpreter for the interview. And it was kind of more fun. I think those kind of things, those kind of moments, you're going to interview someone who's a big star, but they're known to be obnoxious. And so all you do in the program is talk about it and ask the listeners for help. What are we going to do? I said, this is going to be a train wreck. So it does two things. It makes everyone listen because they want to hear the train wreck, and also they're invested in it because they want to go, oh my God, okay, try this. And then you do some of the things that the listeners suggested so they can hear you doing it, and then you review afterwards. Those kind of things, that's fun.
That's cool.
Rather than just have an interview that's awful and you're all embarrassed about it, you kind of involve the listeners, and then we laugh, and then we talk about it and go, oh, that went so badly. I know that's not a specific moment, but those kind of events, they're so much fun, and they get your creative juices firing to how do I make this compelling radio? I think that is the big rule of radio, right? Never be boring. Like whatever you have to do, just don't be boring. People can leave your hard work with the flick of a button. So just never be boring. Let them be going, what are they going to do next? That's what they've got to ask. And I think the other bit of radio wisdom I'll pass on is always ask yourself, is the thing that we're doing on air right now, is that the best thing we have? So whether it's listening to a listener's call, or whether it's doing a segment, or whether it's doing an interview, or whatever, whether it's doing the weather, doesn't matter. You might have a huge superstar coming up in half an hour, but right now is the thing that's on air the very best thing you've got? And if the answer is no, change it.
Do you miss us? Do you miss radio?
Yeah, I do a bit. I do it with my brother now. He does the weekend break on AW. He does Saturdays, Sundays, and I come in and muck around with him. And I've done that for quite some time. And that's great. I come in and muck around on a Saturday. And that's fun because he desperately wants to keep his job and I don't care. And so there's a lot of sibling tension as he's telling me to shut up in the middle of something. It's absolutely fun. I like what radio is. I like that connection. I like its freedoms and how you can be on the moon just with a sound effect and a story. And I enjoy all that. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I do miss having that release. But I do a podcast with a mate of mine who's Andrew Roper, who's a stand-up comedian who lives on the Gold Coast. And we do the podcast. So we do that weekly, and that scratches an itch, but it's not quite the same as doing a radio shift and forming that really interactive community of listeners and hangers on. It's great.
Well, as a fan, we miss you. We'd love to see you back, and it's been a real pleasure to have you on this podcast. So many teaching moments, and I reckon you've got more to give. I don't reckon you're done yet. There's another tour of duty in you, I reckon.
Yeah, that'd be great, mate. From your lips to some owner's ears, and they can employ me, and I'll be right there. Oh, I could be a consultant. I could easily go around and just consult teams. That'd be good. Those guys don't seem to carry any flack for the terrible decisions they make. I can easily do that.
Richard Stubbs, thank you for joining us on the Quarter Hour podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy.